The Jacobs Ladder Show, the international internet broadcast online interview talk radio show, exploring ladders of success with Carolyn and Stephen Jacobs. Broadcast live from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, every Tuesday from 1 to 3 p.m., featuring one guest per hour. Each guest tells us their life story with a one-on-one interview with either Carolyn or Stephen Jacobs. Featured guests include singers, dancers, musicians, entertainers, and entrepreneurs on their ladders of success. Now, here's Carolyn and Stephen Jacobs.
This is Carolyn Jacobs with the Jacobs Ladder Show, where we are live every Tuesday from 1 to 3 p.m. We feature one guest per hour on their ladder of success. Stephen has 1 hour and I have the next. But I'd like to give a thank you out to David Perico. That beautiful theme music, which is the Jacobs Ladder Show theme music, is an original composition entitled To Go With It by jazz composer, arranger, and trumpeter David Perico and his Pop Evolution Orchestra. Thank you, David Perico. Stephen, who do you have today on their Ladder of Success interview?
I have an absolutely gem of a guy with me today. It's Michael Distefano, and he is probably as well known as his father, Sam, who was for many years the entertainment director from the get-go, actually, of the Riviera being built and opened up for several years. But the background of growing up in the industry and the Riv, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're as we were talking earlier, your life is one to be envied as far as I'm concerned. So.
That's very flattering. Thank you.
No, the being as much part of that is, I think every kid in the world dreams of growing up in a hotel, but being able to grow up at the Riviera Hotel Casino in Las Vegas during the day,
it's quite unique.
It had to be a heck of a deal. So we're going to start where we normally start, Michael, and that is with, where were you born?
I was actually born in Miami, Florida, at Mount Sinai Hospital in '69. And my father at the time, excuse me, he started working for Hugh Hefner in 1960 as the musical director at the very first Playboy Club in Chicago. And he transferred to Miami in '62, and he was the musical director at the Miami Playboy Club, which is why I was born in Miami.
So your dad had a musical background then, correct?
He had a very extensive musical background. Of course, he studied classical piano as a toddler, and actually turned professional in his teens. And he was one of the longest standing members of the CFM, Chicago Federation of Musicians. I think he had the 50-year membership award, then the 60-year membership award. But he became a professional pianist in his teens and worked a lot of, he actually started out, ironically, playing in strip clubs near the Indiana-Chicago border. And, of course, his parents, being strict Roman Catholic Sicilians, were not too fond of that. But eventually, when he was drafted into the Army, he ended up being stationed at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, during the Korean War in the early 50s. And just by a fluke, his bunkmate turned out to be the renowned jazz pianist Bill Evans.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, Bill and my father both were roughly the same age. They were in their early 20s at this time. And that's really where he expanded his jazz piano playing, was from hours of watching Bill play in the barracks. They had a little spinet piano there in the corner, and that's where he really developed his jazz skills as a pianist. And, of course, the two of them became best friends, and they would work gigs together in Chicago on the weekend leaves.
Sure.
And that's how he became a very accomplished pianist. And eventually he became a trio leader and then orchestra leader. But he worked all the main clubs in Chicago, from the Cloisters to the Trade Winds to the Living Room, Mr. Kelly's, the London House, etc. And it was at one of those clubs that Hugh Hefner and Victor Lowndes caught him playing and accompanying female vocalists. And they approached him and asked him to open the Playboy Club as musical director. And so he became the musical director at the Chicago Playboy Club.
This is the very first Playboy Club.
The very first Playboy Club was February 1960 on Walton Street there, right off of Michigan Avenue. And eventually, he was transferred to the Miami Club because the musical director there, Norm Geller, who was also a fabulous jazz pianist, wanted to go to New York. And so when Norm went to New York, he called my father in Chicago and said, would you like to come down to Miami? Now, my father had already been in Miami because he graduated from the University of Miami in the mid-'50s. He was already familiar with the city, and he loved the city. So this was done without Hefner's knowledge. He transferred to Miami. Norm went to New York, and by happenstance, Norm ran into Hef. And Hef said, wait a minute, I thought you were down in Miami, to Norm. And Norm said, well, actually, Sam Distefano's down in Miami. And he goes, oh, he goes, I love Sam. He goes, all right, good deal. He goes, you're all right. He goes, you're in the clear then. And that's how my dad ended up in Miami. So that's how I was born in '69 in Miami.
So you were born in Miami.
In Miami, yep. I was only there 1 month, though, before I was transferred. My father got the job at the Lake Geneva Playboy Hotel and Resort and Country Club in the fall of '69. So my mother was already seven or 8 months pregnant with me. And the musical director at the Playboy Hotel and Resort in Lake Geneva was George Gaffney, who went on to become Sarah Vaughan's pianist. Excellent jazz pianist. But he was a little overly passionate at times and somewhat temperamental. And so the entertainment director at that time, Billy Rizzo, called my father and said, can you come up to Lake Geneva? And so my father went to Lake Geneva, and I was born in November, and then in December, my father flew my mother and I up to Lake Geneva, and that's how I ended up in the Midwest.
Okay. Now, for those some of them, people in the world and even in the United States, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin Playboy, it was more than a club. It was a resort.
It was a 1,600-acre utopia, and the interesting thing about it was that Hefner had spotted that piece of property. It was farmland. It was cornfields, and they bought it for pennies on the dollar, and they developed it with, the very best of the best. Jack Nicklaus came in and designed the two 18-hole golf courses. It had a ski chalet, a private airport with a runway that could land a 727. It had 2 lakes with, water sports and activities. It was, trap and ski. They had stables for horseback riding, and of course, Henry Lorenzi and Arnold Morton were the pioneers of the food and beverage operations of all the Playboy clubs. And so, Hefner spared no expense. Architecturally, it was way ahead of its time. And of course, the showroom manager ended up being my godfather, Carlos Cicerello. He ran the showroom there. And when my father arrived there in '69, the first thing he did was recruit and form his own 32-piece orchestra. And some of the sidemen, for instance, Bobby Ojeda on trumpet, ended up playing with Count Basie. He had the A-list players. And my father's orchestra ended up accompanying all the headliners that were booked into the property, including Tony Bennett, Ann Margaret, Sammy Davis, Liza, etc. The list just goes on and on. And so it was really the perfect recipe for a very magical time.
It was, the resort itself was just way ahead of its time.
Breathtaking. Breathtaking.
And it was hard to get into.
Yeah, it was very exclusive. But what made it, I think, successful was that location was only about maybe 80 minutes north of Chicago, 40 minutes from Rockford, 40 minutes from Milwaukee. And so you had people coming in from Michigan, Indiana. It was the tri-state area there. And so even in the winter months, we joke about this to this day, that, a lot of the businesses in the Lake Geneva area struggle during the winter months, unless you're operating a ski chalet. But interestingly, the Playboy Club, there were times where there would be like a 40 below wind chill out there with a horrible blizzard. Roads would be closed. And yet, if you had like Ricky Nelson or Dave Major and the Miners in the showroom, with all credit to them, people would still fight the blizzards and the snow. Elderly guys would drive with their wives, and if it took them 4 hours to get there from Chicago with the windshield wipers, they would go anyway because of the scenery. So
well, when I say it was difficult to get into, meaning that I know that you like I was, you had to be a member of the Playboy Club, but even with that, you better book ahead because it was really popular.
Correct.
It was tough. That's the tough I was talking about getting into.
Yeah, originally the key card holders, that's true. It was, I remember in fact hearing stories about when the club opened in '60 in Chicago, people were literally lined up around the block in the cold. This was in the winter, February.
Right.
And so, yeah, you had to have a key card. It was very exclusive. Years later, I think they became a little less stringent with that level of exclusivity when the chain expanded into
Sure.
the hotels and the resorts worldwide. But no, it was a very prestigious chain. For
And
sure.
as we were talking earlier, the key, I mean, originally, when I joined originally, I got a key that had the Playboy symbol on it. It was actually a key, and then it had your membership number on the back.
Exactly. Then they went to the key card.
Then they went to the card, which was actually a metal card.
A gold medal. Yeah.
Gold medal card.
I've still got my dad's. Yep.
I still got mine.
Yep. It's every healthy red-blooded American male cherish that rite of passage for keep it in their will.
So you're literally growing up as a youngster in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin Playboy Resort.
That's correct.
Tough duty.
That was my playground.
Tough duty.
One of many, actually. And then in the mid to late 70s, my father ended up being promoted to vice president of entertainment for all of the Playboy properties, clubs, and hotels internationally. And he oversaw the booking policy for all of the properties. And so that meant
was a big job.
it was a huge job. I mean, he literally ran an empire. And the result of which was that he was required to do extensively more traveling. And so everywhere he went, he would bring me with him. And so I really learned at the master's knee, as far as the entertainment industry and booking headliners and handling their temperaments and handling contracts and et cetera. So it was really an insider's perspective that was very privileged.
And so how long was your dad there with the Playboy?
25-year career with Playboy.
Wow.
He was with them for 25 years.
And that would have satisfied most people.
True.
And then the real fun began, right?
Then the real fun began. Meshulam Rickless, and at the time he was married to Pia Zadora, owned the Riviera from, I think, the mid-'70s. And in the early to mid-'80s, they had a show at the Versailles Theater there called Solid Gold. The producer was Tibor Rudis. It was an excellent dance show. But the show had kind of run its course in terms of uniqueness because of the style. And Mr. Rickless and my father had thought that Vegas had never really seen a full-scale water-themed show before, with the exception of the one number in the Jubilee that Don Arden put in with the Titanic, where the ship, they simulate the sinking, and there is a significant amount of water in that number, but there had never been an entire 80-minute production show built around water. So they decided to do an aqua-themed show, and they brought in the top producer, Jeff Kutash, who you've interviewed.
Absolutely.
And Jeff was multi-gifted, multi-talented in so many respects, not just as a dancer and a choreographer, but also as a businessman and a designer. And that was really his show. He created the entire vision from soup to nuts. And what was impressive about Splash was that when the Riviera did not exercise Tibor Rudis' option to renew, they dismissed Tibor Rudis' contract in December of '84. And literally from January to June, they had to reconstruct the Versailles Theater. They had to tear out the stage, put in a 100,000-gallon water tank, put in fountains, and the logistics were overwhelming. And while that was going on, Jeff had to literally choreograph and create the major production numbers, bring in the specialty acts, glue it all together so that it would flow,
Sure.
no pun intended, and get it done by June 22nd, 1985 was the grand opening. And Splash went on to run for over a quarter century and gross over $1 billion in proceeds. It was one of the most successfully long-running shows in Vegas history. But they did it in such a short time span, relatively.
Yeah.
And I remember I was there every day for the rehearsals. Everybody was in the pressure cooker. But thankfully it turned out to be very successful. But yeah, the Riviera, we ended up moving to the Riviera. We were actually there 83 to 93, and my father and I lived on the premises.
Now, at some point, when you were at the Riviera, and of course your total knowledge of just observation is staggering, but you start to take an active role. Is that at the Riviera when you start taking an active role?
Correct. I also followed in my father's footsteps as a musician. I'm also a pianist, a jazz pianist. And so I had also joined the CFM in Chicago when I was, I think, 12. I got my
Okay.
union card. I was either 11 or 12. I got it on both drums and piano. I'm also a jazz drummer. And so I ended up opening the remodeled version of the gourmet buffet at the Riviera. The headliner was Prime Rib, and I was the opening act. No, but seriously, though, I'm not kidding. The Prime Rib was on the marquee. They had a picture of the Prime Rib, and I think my picture was in the upper right-hand corner. But it was $9.95 for the full dinner buffet. And then I think at one time, they had the buffet dinner and splash. I think it was $13.95. It included the dinner and the show.
Wow.
This was, going back almost a third of a century.
Right.
But I was officially the Riviera house pianist. I played all the high roller parties. I played the weddings in the wedding chapel there. I played in the gourmet rooms. I opened up Christopher's restaurant in 1988. Now, you got to remember, I was a teenager. I was 18 years old. I
Right.
mean, all my buddies were either working at the pool or babysitting or had a paper route or whatever. And,
Right.
and I was working, 2 or 3 nights a week, a couple sets, and I was making, 4 or 5 times what the average
Sure.
person would, every teenager would make. So I was in seventh heaven. And, of course, I also ended up working with Doug McValley and Bella Tabak with the motorcycle act called the Globe of Death.
Oh, I remember that.
Became heavily involved with them and started managing them and booking them at state fairs and auto shows. And, in fact, even to this day, I'm still booking them. So,
Really?
yeah,
I remember those guys. Those guys
hell
were,
of an act.
It was an unbelievable act in that Globe. Yeah.
Very entertaining.
Yeah. They're doing things you go, you can't do that.
Yeah, 60 miles an hour in all directions, just within inches of each other.
Yeah.
It's really a harrowing act. Very exciting.
Yeah. So, but let's back up just a little bit
Sure.
here. So when did you first take up piano? I mean, was that just because you're being around your dad?
Yes, I grew up listening to my father play ever since I was in the womb, really. And then I started taking lessons. I was probably, when my father started teaching me, before I could even reach the keyboard, I was probably 3 or 4 when I started, actually touching the keyboard and playing notes. And then I started to learn formal theory and scales when I was probably 6. I started taking lessons. And so I did study classical, and I ended up receiving a scholarship to the Interlochen Center for the Arts up
Right.
in northern Michigan. It's a very prestigious music academy up there. I did 2 summers in the camp, and then I went on to do my high school education there, majoring in jazz, piano, and drums.
Right.
And so that's really where I got my formal musical education. And that's how I learned how to play. But of course, jazz, I really learned from being in the clubs and, having a first-hand experience witnessing performers like Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Sarah Vaughan, Mel Torme from the wings.
The great advantage here that I see is the fact that you not only your dad's a pianist, now you're taking and learning the correct scales and
Theory.
learning to read music and
Correct.
the theory and how the whole thing comes together. And then you get to sit and watch all of these great musicians perform, which now all of a sudden got to make all the connections
Absolutely.
in your head between the theory and the reality, and
Application,
every day must have been a oh wow kind of day, right?
It really was. And interestingly, jazz was still really at the height of its popularity in the 70s and 80s, even though a lot of the rock bands were just kicking in. But it was still really hot on the scene, and
Right.
so a lot of those legends were still performing, which
Well-
gave us the opportunity to see them.
And Hefner was a huge
Yep. Jazz aficionado
yeah,
and buff.
yeah.
Big jazz buff. That's
and,
true.
and actually brought a lot of entertainers to the forefront that crossed all kinds of lines at the time.
Very much so.
So-
In fact, I think Hefner, to this day, hosted the largest jazz festival in history in the 50s prior to the opening of the first Playboy Club in Chicago. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Soldier Field. It was one of the big, big performing arenas, and he brought in Billie Holiday right before she passed away. I think he had Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong. He brought in top legends.
Yep.
There were more people on that 2 or 3 day roster than in the history of any other jazz festival, including the Newport and Montreux Jazz Festival. So, yeah, he's legendary for his appreciation and promotion of jazz. No question about it.
So tell me, what was your first paid gig?
My first paid gig was at the Abbey in Fontana, Wisconsin, on the other side of Lake Geneva. I was on drums. I was 11. My father was on piano. Eddie DeHaas was on bass. And you know who the singer was? Bill Acosta. I'm not kidding. Bill Acosta, the impressionist here in town.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent vocalist. And that was my first pay gig. It was $125, which would have taken me about 6 months to earn babysitting or delivering newspapers or collecting golf balls.
Well, Mike, we're going to come right back here and continue with this. You think that it's been interesting to this point. Wait till we come back. This gets better and better and better. This is Stephen Jacobs with the Jacobs Ladder Show. We're going to be right back in 2 and 2.
Looking for great jazz? Look no further than the Dispensary, located at Tropicana and Eastern, Friday and Saturday nights, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. The bar and lounge is family-owned and operated for 37 years. A cozy hideaway has no windows, just a big red door, 24/7 gaming and delicious food. Owner Adele Bella says, we're retro, like an old-fashioned saloon complete with swinging doors. Entertainers from the Strip stop in after their performances to join Uli Geisendorfer's trio and great jazz singers. He hosts the jazz sessions every Friday and Saturday, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Rave reviews about their $5.95 steak burger, sandwiches, and appetizers are less than $10. Check it online at www.thedispensarylounge.com. Visit the Dispensary, 2451 East Tropicana near Eastern, and enjoy the feeling of old Las Vegas at its finest with jazz.
The Las Vegas Distillery is the first distillery in the history of Nevada. The Las Vegas Distillery spirits are handcrafted from grains to bottle. Vodka, rum, whiskey, bourbon, moonshines, and the house specialty, Rumsky, a blend of our rum and whiskey. 93% of all ingredients come from Nevada's Winnemucca farms. Please come by and visit the Las Vegas Distillery's 2 custom-made Copper Angel stills. You are welcome anytime. Located at 7330 Eastgate Road, Suite 100, Henderson, Nevada, 89011. Or call 702-629-7534 or go visit www.lasvegasdistillery.com. Come by and taste our new Grandma's Apple Pie Moonshine. Think locally, drink locally. The Las Vegas Distillery.
And welcome back to the Jacobs Ladder Show. This is Stephen Jacobs, and I'm here with Michael Stefano, and musician, accomplished pianist and drummer, and of course for the other people who know him also as a great entertainment director. He's a great logistics guy, as we talked about earlier, and we're so happy to have you on the show.
Likewise, thank you.
So we kind of left you where you had gotten your first paid gig at 11 years old as a drummer with your dad on a piano.
Correct.
And so here you got 2 things going for you as a young man, really, don't you? I mean, you've got this whole entertainment director thing going that you're seeing, and then you've got the musician side going. So as we progress here, and you're now with your dad out at the Riv, which direction do you go, do you think?
Well, I got more into the booking end of it and management end of it when I started going full blast with Doug McValley with the Globe of Death motorcycle.
Right.
I spent all of my efforts. Of course, I was still working nightly playing the piano at the Riv. I had a 6 nights a week steady gig there. And then every now and then I would go out and do either casuals or one-nighters, or I would perform for singers. I worked with Bob Anderson at the Harrah's back in the early 90s in the Keep Smiling America show, Donnie Moore show there, and Bob was the star of the show. And that was one of the more privileged musical experiences for me, because Bob was so good, is so good at what he does, that he was one of the few singing impressionists who the singers that he would impersonate would allow him to have their actual show charts and arrangements. So, for instance, Bob Anderson's book, his show book, contained authentic charts from Tom Jones, Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis. So playing the piano for Bob was like playing for all
those
of them.
guys.
Yeah, because it was like getting to play for 6 people in one, literally. So that was you know what I'm saying. It was a great experience, and being able to play those charts and accompany him was really not only a privilege, but it was also a great learning experience and developmental too. So I was doing a little bit of both, but my primary focus was on booking the Globe Act. At the time, Doug McValley owned about 6 Globes, and he was recruiting and training riders from Brazil and Mexico. And so we were booking them at state fairs and auto shows all over the world, actually. And that kept me very busy. But eventually I went on to produce my own shows. I had a show in Laughlin called Starorama at the Riverside Resort, which actually starred Bob Anderson. Bob was it was a 70-minute full-scale production show. I had dancers, and then I had the Globe Act.
Right.
And in fact, I've written a production show over the past 3 or 4 years that's got 70 in the cast, 80 in the crew. It's about a 150-person show. It's on the scale of like a Jubilee, but I have not secured brand licensing rights, so I'm not really at liberty to disclose the title yet. But I wrote the overture for the opening act. I brought a little sliver of it, and it's with a 32-piece orchestra, all A-list players, including Joe Lano on guitar, Dave Weckl on drums, Tom Kennedy on bass, and I'm on piano.
And let's take a quick listen to this, okay? Wow. That is a very nice piece of music, young man.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's and tell me if people want to try to get a hold of you, you've got your own website, correct?
Yes, MikeRDistefano.com.
And you got a Facebook or?
Yes, I'm on Facebook under Michael Distefano.
Okay, terrific. So this actually, we were talking about it while we were listening to it, but this was actually recorded out at the UNLV recording studio.
Yes, they have an excellent facility out there, and my co-arranger, Matt Kerner, was a protege student of Dave Loeb, the director of the jazz program out there. And he's also a great horn player from upstate New York. And I had written this overture for a production show that I've also written and designed. And that's the opening overture. It was just a clip from it. The actual running length is 8 minutes, but you just heard a slice of it there. But I also received a great deal of help from Vinnie Falcone and a hot jazz pianist out of Chicago named Larry Novak. And the two of them helped me tremendously in arranging that and putting it together, because there's 3 key changes in it. And of course, it was done with a 30-piece orchestra, and we had all the top string players from the Las Vegas Symphony and a really, really hot rhythm section, of course. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
So are you still playing?
I do. I play every day. I try to play at least maybe a half hour to an hour a day. My father inherited a 9-foot concert grand black ebony Baldwin Grand Prix piano in 1963, the year Kennedy was shot. And excuse me, actually no, his friend was an insurance agent. His name was Spencer Lichty. And
what a great name.
It's great. Spencer Lichty in Miami, Florida. He had his own insurance company. He was a multimillionaire, but he wanted to learn how to play the piano. He loved my father's piano playing, and so he asked my father to accompany him to go buy a piano. So my father went with him to the Baldwin distributor in Miami, and my father saw the piano in the showroom. It was breathtaking. It was one of, I think, like maybe 100 models. It's a Grand Prix Baldwin, 9-foot concert grand. And so he fell in love with it, and he said, this is the one you got to get. So Spencer ended up buying it. He didn't learn how to play very well, but 3 years later, tragically, he developed cancer, and he passed away. And in his will, he left the piano to my father. Now, Spencer's mother tried to contest the will, and it went to court, and the language was clear and concise, and the judge ruled in favor of my father. He inherited the piano. So I grew up playing on that piano, and we still have the piano to this day.
Great.
And so I still, I try to play at least a half hour, an hour a day just to keep the chops up,
I can't imagine the dollar worth of that.
Yeah, no, well, it's on our homeowners, valued at I think 60 or 70K probably.
At least.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rare model, and Vinnie Falcone was kind enough back in the 80s when we were at the Riviera to have all of the action restrung and improved, because it was aged at that point. The piano was almost a quarter of a century at that point, and so he had all the action redone for us, and now it just sounds phenomenal. It's a great piano. I've got it on my YouTube channel, Mike Distefano Las Vegas. If you go to the YouTube channel, I've got some clips of me playing some jazz tunes on that very piano, the Black Baldwin.
Well, if you're going to have somebody work on your piano, that's Vinny's probably
Vinny's the best. And very few people know this about Vinny. He's also a schooled and licensed Steinway piano tuner, which is very rare for monster jazz pianists. A lot of the top flight A-list jazz pianists. Bill Evans was also a tuner. He knew how to tune a piano, but it's a separate art form, believe it or not. It's a separate science. It's very distinctive from just playing.
Yeah, Vinny told me that a guy master showed him how to do that.
Right.
And that's how he picked up extra money.
Exactly.
Between his gigs trying to do that.
That's
and
right.
then worked for the piano dealer there in his hometown.
That's right.
I actually had to make a decision whether to stay with that or actually get into business, so to speak.
Right.
But yeah, it was where the nickname Hammer came from. I always thought it meant how much of a disciplinarian he was. But it was actually because his tuning hammer.
Sure.
So let's go back to some of the things you've done that have been with some of the productions and some of the things you did outside the Riviera. I mean, I'd love to know what it was like living in the Riviera.
That was spectacular.
I mean, when you were hungry, you just picked the phone up, right?
Just pick the phone up and dial room service. And what was great about the Riv, in many ways, Meshulam Riklis and Pia Zadora both, they reminded me a little bit of Hugh Hefner in terms of care and concern and attention to detail when it came to hospitality. The Riviera was a very, very high-class, hospitable operation, and the food was phenomenal. I remember the Riv for years was famous for its chicken salad sandwich.
I remember that.
Remember that? They were famous
absolutely.
for that. And they also had a waffle iron with the Riviera logo, so that when they made the Belgian waffles, it would say Riviera Hotel and Casino on it. And they had that. It was the original waffle iron, I think from the 50s or 60s. But those types of long-standing traditions were ones that were heavily guarded and maintained by Riklis and Pia. And so it was very familial, the atmosphere, and very elegant. But it really was like living in a dream, living in the hotel.
Well, that and having the RFB is always nice to have.
That's one way of putting it.
Yes. So anyway, so you're doing a lot of work at the Riviera, but then you've stepped outside of that. As I told you before the show started, I could have spent the entire show just reading your credentials off and the awards and accolades that you've gotten. But
thank you.
You've done a lot of things. So let's step outside the Riviera a little bit, and we know your music stuff. But some of the other things that you did that are not necessarily music, but obviously are all connected to it.
Yes, I started college at Loyola University in Chicago. I did my freshman year there, and I was missing Las Vegas. And even though I was attending the downtown the Water Tower campus on Michigan Avenue down there, I still missed being out in Vegas. I missed my father, and so I wanted to get back out to Las Vegas. And unbeknownst to me at the time, when I looked into the college tuition rates in Nevada as compared with those throughout the rest of the nation, comparatively, and I'm not sure if this still holds true today, although I'm fairly confident that it does hold true, Nevada has some of the lowest college tuition rates in the nation.
Right.
And so when I discovered that half of your baccalaureate degree could come from the College of Southern Nevada, which is even less expensive than the tuition rates at UNLV, I figured you have to be, excuse me for saying this, you have to be a fool to not get your education in Nevada. So when I looked into that, I figured, this is fantastic. The rates are low, and then of course, Nevada has Pell Grants and scholarships and work programs and everything that even get the rates down even lower yet. So that was one of the primary reasons that I really wanted to pursue my education. Of course, my father had always drilled it into my head, the importance of a college education, as well as Mr. Riklis. Meshulam Riklis was a very passionate proponent of college education. He believed in it, stringently, and he was a head math genius. He taught mathematics at the University of Ohio, and of course, his degree was also in business administration. He got his master's, I think, at University of Ohio as well, and we used to sit and have long conversations with Mr. Riklis, and I remember him talking to me about the importance of eventually, because I was, as any young person would get caught up in the glamour of Las Vegas, and for a while there, even though I was working in show business, I did get a little sidetracked in terms of backburnering the education, and Riklis and my father said, eventually you got to go back and get your education, so I did just that, and more so, and that's when I ended up going to UNLV, and I got my master's in business, and I ended up going to law school here as well. And so I also attended the Key Realty School, and on the way over here to the studio today, I just found out some very delightful news. I passed my national and state portions for the real estate broker salesperson exam, and I haven't applied for my license yet with the GLVAR, but the broker that I'm going with, whose name I can't disclose right now because he just signed a contract for a reality series. Listen to this. Honestly, I got 26 episodes in the fall. And this is my broker that I'm going to be going with as a broker salesperson.
Wow.
So he just got a reality series that's going to start in the fall. Now, you talk about coming full circle with everything, combining business with show business.
Sure.
Or managerial skills with show business. This is, I just found this out not even 40 minutes ago, that my broker just signed a contract with, I think it's Bravo, one of the networks on cable, to do he's doing 26 episodes in the fall for a reality series, and I'm going to be one of his agents. So that was pretty exciting.
It's amazing how things gel up together.
It is, and I kind of got into real estate because, this is another thing that kind of blew my mind that I'd forgotten about. My father went to real estate school in Fort Lauderdale. He always had a passion for real estate, And he told me that, as much as show business is wonderful, and it is, sometimes with the shifting trends in show business, it's not always as reliable as having something like, a degree in business
Sure.
or real estate. And so I'm also a real estate investor, and always had a passion for real estate as well. So
Pretty cool. We're going to come back with a continuing story here with Mike after we take a little break here. This is Stephen Jacobs with the Jacobs Ladder Show, and we're here every Tuesday from 1 to 3. We'll be right back in 2 and 2.
The Las Vegas Distillery is the first distillery in the history of Nevada. The Las Vegas Distillery spirits are handcrafted from grains to bottle. Vodka, rum, whiskey, bourbon, moonshines, and the house specialty, rumsky, a blend of our rum and whiskey. 93% of all ingredients come from Nevada's Winnemucca farms. Please come by and visit the Las Vegas Distillery's 2 custom-made Copper Angel stills. You are welcome anytime. Located at 7330 Eastgate Road, Suite 100, Henderson, Nevada 89011. Or call 702-629-7534 or go visit www.lasvegasdistillery.com. Come by and taste our new Grandma's Apple Pie Moonshine. Think locally, drink locally. The Las Vegas Distillery.
Looking for great jazz? Look no further than the Dispensary, located at Tropicana and Eastern, Friday and Saturday nights, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. The bar and lounge is family-owned and operated for 37 years. A cozy hideaway has no windows, just a big red door, 24/7 gaming and delicious food. Owner Adele Bella says, "We're retro, like an old-fashioned saloon complete with swinging doors." Entertainers from the Strip stop in after their performances to join Uli Geisendorfer's trio and great jazz singers. He hosts the jazz sessions every Friday and Saturday, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Rave reviews about their $5.95 steak burger, sandwiches, and appetizers are less than $10. Check it online at www.thedispensarylounge.com. Visit the Dispensary, 2451 East Tropicana near Eastern, and enjoy the feeling of old Las Vegas at its finest with jazz.
And welcome back to the Jacobs Ladder Show. This is Stephen Jacobs, and I'm having a great time here with Michael Distefano. Michael, we left it that we were talking about UNLV, by the way, and the cost effectiveness of it. You know, and I think that the people involved with the university have really done a marvelous job over the years of recognizing a lot of musicians. Music school, okay?
Absolutely.
Doing that. A lot of gaming, a lot of hotel management schools for that.
Yes.
And that university has some of the finest, by far, in the world, schools in those areas. And I know there's other areas.
Yep.
But
The William F. Harrah College of Hotel Administration has been ranked #1 in the world with Cornell for decades.
yeah, and how smart that they recognize this is where to have it.
Absolutely.
Because of the properties we have
Surrounded
here.
by it, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's ideal. And I think they also have satellite campuses now in, I think, Singapore and Rome.
Really?
Yeah. UNLV does. They sure do. They sure do. Yeah.
So you're producing a lot of other stuff, though. You've produced a lot of things. I mean, outside of the Riv, you put a lot of shows together.
I have. I've worked on charity events, production shows, managing specialty acts, booking specialty acts. In fact, right now, I'm managing 2 very big headliners here in Las Vegas that I'm looking to book throughout Nevada and also abroad. And so, I've been involved in a lot of meetings with that, and I'm very, very close to signing a deal for a top headliner to do a production show, long running, here in Las Vegas.
So let me see here. You're a pianist. You're putting a production show together with an extravagant orchestra and dancers and singers and specialties. You're about to launch into the real estate business. you're getting pulled into a reality show probably because of the other part of it.
My real estate broker, right?
And you're an agent for certain entertainers
Right.
around the country, and you're booking acts all over the place.
Right.
So
My father used to say, "You're a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker." but the problem is, you can be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Now, there's two philosophies on that. During the Renaissance era, you had to be a jack of all trades just to survive, right?
Right.
Because you couldn't go to a local, drive-through and get things done. You had to do it on your own. But there's two schools of thought on that. I think that to be a master of multiple trades might be better than just being a jack of all trades and a master of none. But if you're a master of one and you're not a jack of all trades, the payoff is probably better to have multiple pursuits and multiple talents. And, it's funny because when I went to CSN and UNLV, I was one of the first students, I believe, who was pursuing multiple degrees simultaneously. And I remember meeting with a little bit of resistance from educational administrators during that time. They kind of frowned upon that because they were concerned about whether or not, if a student was getting straight A's like I was a 4.0 student, taking so many classes, in course overloads. I used to take credit overloads. I would take, one semester I took like 20 classes in one semester and I got straight A's. And they were concerned about it because they thought it might have reflected in some way, it might have raised questions about the rigor of the curriculum. And so, but what's surprising is that over the last, and this was 15, 20 years ago, but over the last 15 or 20 years now, you're seeing more and more students pursuing multiple degrees, and the colleges themselves and the Board of Regents have now designed dual degree curriculums where you go in and you get a master's and a JD in the same amount of time it would take to get one of them alone. So now they're offering multiple degree
Right.
programs, and because they're discovering that people are benefiting more from diversifying their education so that they have more fields to fall back on if for some reason they don't succeed in the primary field that they desire. So, I think it is good to have training and education in multiple areas. It can never hurt you. I don't think.
I totally agree with you, and it's a good thing that Leonardo da Vinci decided that he didn't had just focus on one thing, because
That's right.
look at all of the things that he was into.
Or Edison, right?
Or Edison, or any of those guys. Okay,
Right.
so yeah, I agree with you, and not only that. Interestingly enough for you, many of the different skills that you have in different areas all correlate and interact.
Right.
And I believe that when that happens, you are better at whatever particular one you're focused on the time, because
The ins and outs of.
how it interacts with all of the
Right.
other things that have to also coordinate and go along with that.
Very true.
So, as we talked about earlier, in my opinion, in the military, the most valuable guy
Logistics.
on the block is the logistics officer.
Absolutely.
Without him, just a bunch of guys standing around waiting for stuff.
Very true. Well said.
So you're now, you got your real estate thing going. But the other thing is you've got this production that you're also trying to put together.
Yes,
Okay?
we're pitching a number of different properties for that, and I'm in the process right now of securing the brand licensing rights for the name of the show. And then once that falls into place, then we have a number of different properties that we're pursuing, some new properties that are coming up here in Las Vegas.
Right. So tell me something. Do you like Vegas more now, or do you like Vegas more from that, or is that two different deals?
Well, of course, I appreciate the nostalgia and the history. I'm grateful to have been a significant part of it, so it'll always hold a place in my heart. But at the same time, yes, I'm excited about the future of Las Vegas. I think that the implosion of the Riviera is bittersweet because, of the nostalgia memories.
Right.
But at the same time, I saw the designs of what the convention authority is going to do with that property, and it's breathtaking. I mean, it's going to be a magnificent facility, and the only constant in life is change.
Well, the other thing is when people ask me what I thought about that thing, I said, what the convention center has done has gone and put their arm out and grabbed the Strip.
Yep.
Now
Yep.
there's
On the Strip now.
Now there's a physical direct link
Right.
from the Strip
Yep,
all the way
Paradise.
back through their whole
Smart.
deal.
Yeah, well, that's what made the Riv property unique. It's a 26-acre parcel. It had frontage on both Paradise.
Both sides.
and the boulevard,
Right.
which made it ideal for them. So
And David Siegel got himself a good deal when he
I think it was 189 million, which was
Yeah,
a steal
Yeah, and the fact
for that size parcel.
for that parcel.
Yeah.
And it's got a pretty good footprint.
Yeah, it's the best.
So, and anyway, so when do you think you're going to be able to have that show? I know there's a lot of pieces involved. What do you hit?
Hopefully in the next 20 to 24 months.
Oh, okay.
That's what we're hoping for. So we'll see how things
So
go.
it sounds like you might be looking to you might be pitching us some properties that haven't quite started up yet.
Yeah, well, there's a couple different properties. One of the properties that we got our eye on is the Genting. That's going to be a $4 billion project from Malaysia, right across from where the Riviera was
Right.
for the Stardust.
Boy, those guys made a good deal at the right time, didn't they?
Yeah. Boy Gaming. I think they were unable to complete the echelon, and so
Right.
they got that for a song too.
But that's going to be a super property.
Breathtaking.
I've seen some of the renderings, and
The theater's 4,000 seats,
oh, you're kidding me!
and it's a $4 billion project. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So do you think the Strip is coming back downtown?
I think downtown is in a state of flux, but it is developing. I think that guys like Derek Stevens are very instrumental in helping the downtown area. I think that it'll continue to revitalize, but the main Strip is going to always be the primary focus, I think. But Mr. Koktai, who's the CEO of Genting's International, I actually worked with him back in the 80s in Kuala Lumpur with the Globe of Death. He's the one that's putting up the Resorts World, where the old Stardust was. That's going to be, I think, the star of the Strip when they complete that.
So
That's a big project.
Oh yeah, and
Astronomical.
But what I'm saying is, it's moving the Strip north again.
True.
So
Yeah, that's true.
that's what
Because
I'm-
you're right. The
that's what
south
I'm-
end was
yeah,
huge too.
yeah,
That's
so,
yeah.
yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So anyway, Michael, thank you so much for coming in. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Likewise.
Keep us up to date on what you're doing.
Of course.
We'll get you back if that's okay with you.
Be delighted.
Okay. I really enjoyed having you here today. And I know we just barely skimmed on all of the stories that you could possibly tell us. So
It flew by.
this is Stephen Jacobs with the Jacobs Ladder Show. We're here every Tuesday from 1 until 3 and have great guests like Michael Stefano, who you can go on and go to his website at michaelstefano.com. Or Mike Stefano, I'm sorry.
Mike R. Distefano. You got it.
.com, okay. And he's on Facebook, of course. So anyway, this is Stephen Jacobs with the Jacobs Ladder Show. We'll see you back here next week, same time, same place, and take care.
Views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.